Hello and welcome to another live stream brought to you by Women's Health and Wellbeing Services. My name is Melanie Robson. I'm a counselling psychologist here at Women's Health. We are based in Perth, Western Australia, and I live stream once a week, sometimes twice a week, just depending, but I typically live stream once a week on a Tuesday or a Wednesday morning about mental health subjects, psychological kind of topics, things to do with the mind, that kind of domain, given that I'm a psychologist. And the point of doing live streams is to offer an opportunity for anyone out there to interact, to ask questions, to share their stories, anything like that. By all means, go for it. And we started doing these live streams 6 months ago now, possibly a bit more at the start of the whole pandemic craziness when it was hitting Perth. And we had to close our doors to physical clients and services. So we sort of thought, how can we innovate and pivot and be a bit more creative and offer content online? So hence one of those ideas was to go live and do live streams. So here we are. So I live stream once a week, as I've said, on sort of mental health subjects. At the end of the week, we usually have someone else live streaming, although lately it's been myself and Kate just having a chat. But those other live streams are more on physical health, health promotion, wellness topics, those kinds of things. And that's another opportunity to have a chat with us and interact and ask any questions, be part of the party, that kind of thing. So, moving on from that introduction, today I'm going to be talking a bit about panic and what is panic and what a panic attack is and what panic disorder is. So again, as I've been doing for the last few weeks now, I've been drawing content and information from a really helpful website called the Centre for Clinical Interventions. That's actually a service that's based here in Western Australia, Perth, Western Australia, run by the Health Department. And the CCI, as it's called, has a brilliant website, cci.wa.gov.au, I think. Otherwise, you can Google Centre for Clinical Interventions. And they have a whole heap of free online resources, workbooks, modules on a huge variety of mental health subjects. So depression, anxiety, PTSD, panic, body dysmorphia, procrastination, perfectionism, all social anxiety, lots of different topics, and they've kind of been adding to them over the years, which is really good. And their content is based on CBT, which is cognitive behavioural therapy, and that can be a really good kind of starting therapy if someone hasn't ever had any kind of counselling before and they've got a distinct, issue that they're struggling with. It can be quite helpful for that, and increasing your awareness of your symptoms and looking at some of the links between your thoughts, feelings and behaviours, because often there's some pretty strong links there that are kind of fallen into some unhelpful patterns and ways that get us stuck. So it's one therapeutic technique of many, and it can be very structured. So hence on that website there is whole workbooks and modules that you can do on your own. Here's some paper here from that. Or you can do them with the help of a therapist, counsellor, psychologist, whoever you happen to be seeing. It's not the be all and end all, but can be a really good starting point. So, and they're really informative. I find a lot of their content is really helpful in that it gives really great explanations of many different mental health issues, and sort of really helps to pull it apart, increase someone's awareness. So it's very psychoeducational. That's what we would call it, psychoeducational in nature, because it helps you really learn about what's happening for you, what's happening in your head, exploring your body and your behaviours and how it all sort of fits together. So again, today I'm drawing on some of their content. I've just got some of their information sheets. I don't have the entire workbooks because A, that's a lot to download, print out. B, I wouldn't have enough time, and C, you're really advised to work through those with a qualified professional. But if you can't, by all means do it by yourself online. If nothing else, you can just have a flick through and learn some stuff. It's pretty cool. So today I'm going to be talking about the fun experience of panic. So if you've ever had a panic attack, you will know full well how horrendous they are. And obviously panic and a panic attack is a little bit more than just being anxious. Anxiety is incredibly common. I would say every human being at some point in their lives will have an experience or multiple experiences or chronic experience of anxiety. And anxiety looks really different for every person, honestly. How it kind of manifests in Joe Blogs over there would be quite different for Sue Smith over there, kind of thing. And anxiety can be one of those things that just kind of bubbles along below the surface. Panic is kind of a step up from that, and a panic attack obviously is kind of a big step up from that. And the kind of the tricky thing with panic attacks is often that they can come seemingly out of the blue, which makes it really difficult to predict, to kind of manage that, as you can imagine, because you can even have panic attacks in your sleep. Wake up in this state of sort of panic and your heart racing and what's kind of been happening here. And you can see the problem in that, really, because if you can't predict when you're going to have a panic attack, or there's no kind of apparent triggers, sometimes there would definitely be triggers, but other times there might not be. You might be just walking down the street or chilling at home, I don't know, any kind of situation, and suddenly you're overcome with this wave of panic. And what can happen, obviously, is that you can sort of panic about the panic, and you can get very anxious that you're going to have a panic attack in the middle of the street or in the middle of the shopping centre, or when you're visiting a friend or something like that, and then that just kind of increases the anxiety and the fear around that, and you kind of get more restricted, I would say, in your life, because typically when someone's really anxious or panicky, what they do is avoid. You start to withdraw from the world, you start to isolate yourself, you start to avoid all different situations and people and places that you suspect may bring on bad anxiety or a panic attack. Whilst that may help in the short term, sure, you're decreasing, hopefully, the chances of you having a panic attack. In the long term, though, we know that that's not a good solution, because you're avoiding facing that problem, and you're avoiding being able to teach yourself something different, and creating a bit of an internal kind of monster there, and it's one way to conceptualize really any mental health condition is that, or any uncomfortable feeling, I'll say, is that it's like a little uninvited guest. So you could picture it as a little uninvited monster, or a little beast that's kind of knocking at your door, or a little lion cub, often I'll use that example, and we just want it to go away. So we do whatever we can to shut it up and make it go away. We don't want it to come in the house. We don't want it to be part of our lives. We don't want to believe that it's actually part of us. But in doing that, in trying to suppress it or deny it or avoid, distract, all these things, we're actually growing it. We're actually giving it more attention. It's taking more sort of psychological energy in your mind to try and suppress that, and in the body, that will come out in the body for sure. So it's taking up more energy in your whole system to try and deny it and suppress it, because we're so frightened of what it means. The flip side of that is being willing to accept it, which sounds freaky and weird and are you kidding, Mel, what are you talking about, kind of thing. And I'm not saying, you've got to go, well, great, I'm just going to be this bundle of anxiety and panic for the rest of my life. It's when we resist certain experiences and feelings in our lives, certain thoughts, all these kinds of things that causes more problems than the original problem, shall we say. But I'm kind of I'm just mindful that I'm jumping ahead of myself and talking a bit more about possible kind of treatments and ways to go about that. So we'll get to that later about sort of acceptance and what we do with that. So first I'm just going to talk about panic and what is panic. So we'll be reading from some of the content here, as I've mentioned. So in order to understand panic, we have to understand fear. And fear is an ancient alarm system within us. It's very automatic. It's inbuilt in us. We would not be alive today as humans, as a whole species, if we didn't have this internal fear system, the fight or flight system. You may have heard of that, which has kept us alive over centuries, really thousands of years. And so that's that whole system within us that gets activated, gets triggered when we think we're in danger. And of course, thousands of years ago, that would have been extremely useful if we were living out in the wild, you know, and got confronted by a tiger or a mammoth or I don't know what other kind of beasts were around back then. I suppose it depends where you lived in the world. Snake even kind of thing, you know. So, and that would trigger this kind of fight or flight or freeze. We see this in animals as well. So what is happening is a very quick and automatic response in the body that's activating what we would call the sympathetic nervous system, and boom, it's kind of on. So your heart starts racing, you know, blood starts getting diverted from the digestive system because you don't need to be digesting food when you really need to be running from that animal. So, you know, blood starts to move, your blood pressure increases, the blood starts to go to the extremities to try to get you moving, so to your muscles, to get you, you know, the major muscle groups. Your breathing becomes sort of rapid. Your thoughts become very hyper vigilant because you're like, oh, there's the tiger in the bush there. And very quickly your mind is going, what do I need to do? Do I run from this? Do I stay and fight it off? Do I just freeze, you know, kind of thing? That's also a response you'll see in animals that just freeze and play dead. And they actually do say to do that, I think, with, I don't know if it's bears or something like that. I don't live in America, so I don't really know. But that's sort of ringing a bell. So there's this automatic alarm response that goes on within us when we think we're in danger. And like I said, that's a really ancient system that it still exists within us, and unfortunately we don't need that as much anymore. We do and we don't. The point is, or the problem is, that our brains aren't able to sort of differentiate, is this a real fear, is this a real threat, or is it actually nothing that I need to be scared of, but I'm interpreting it to be scary. You know, so you might go to a shopping centre and there's actually no wild animals there and nothing is going to kill you, but on some level in your mind, there's some perception of threat there that's ticking along in your brain. And then you step foot in a shopping centre and bush, you have a panic attack, you know, not fun. So that's what's happening. There's this internal system that is being activated when we least expect it and when we don't want it. So, like I said, there's kind of this whole range of symptoms that can get activated in our system. So, and they could be, you know, very mild symptoms right through to a full-on panic attack. So what is a symptom? What are some of the symptoms of a panic attack? So I'm just going to read through them. So obviously the heart, you know, racing, really loud heartbeat, really quick heartbeat, feeling like the skipping heartbeat kind of thing. You might start to shake and tremble. You might start to sweat. Shortness of breath, this is a big one. I'll be talking about the importance of breath and breathing and panic in a little bit. Difficulty breathing, choking sensation, you know, tightness in the chest or pressure, feeling sick, you know, feeling nauseous, that, oh, you know, I'm going to vomit right now. You might actually get like loose bowels, you might have the urge to just run to the toilet because you're like, there's something going on down there. You might feel really faint, you know, really lightheaded, really dizzy. You might get tingling in the very extremities. And remember, that's to do with the blood changing, what's happened, the blood, the circulatory system in the body kind of changing where it's diverting blood to. Hot flushes, definitely, you might be going really red, or you could get really chilled, you know, have this kind of opposite kind of response. Feelings of kind of being really disassociated and disconnected from the environment around you. So that's when you start to feel like you're leaving your body. You know, you're kind of dissociating in some ways. Things start to feel really hazy and vague and numb, and that's kind of the mind. When the mind gets completely overwhelmed with fear, one of the ways that the mind manages that is to dissociate. And we often see that with people who have experienced trauma and abuse, and one of the ways that their minds were able to manage surviving that situation was to kind of leave their body when they're being traumatized. So, and that can happen in a panic attack too. Thoughts of losing control or going crazy, and fear of dying. You know, I think many people who have full-on raging panic attack will absolutely feel like they are going to die because they're getting these sensations in the chest, this kind of pressure or pain. They can feel their heart racing. They feel like they're going to faint, they're going to throw up. You know, all these things. And of course, you'd be thinking that's it. I'm checking out. I'm dying. Like, what's going on here, kind of thing. Often too, with a panic attack, there can be real fear of fainting. But because you're feeling kind of faint already and kind of dizzy, but the fainting system in the body, the actual biological system, is quite different to the experience and the system involved in a panic attack. So it's actually quite unlikely that you would faint. But the point is, there is that absolute fear that you're going to faint or that you're going to die. And you might be thinking, I just want the ground to swallow me up, kind of thing. But that's something that you're wishing rather than kind of fearing that you're going to die or faint. So, and characteristics of a panic attack include it can happen really, really quickly. It can just kind of suddenly come on, like I was saying before. There can be no apparent kind of trigger, and suddenly you're in the midst of a panic attack. It can peak between 1 and 10 minutes, but the acute stage can last between 5 to 10 minutes, which you think, oh, that's not very long. But let me tell you, if you're in the middle of a panic attack, 5 minutes or 10 minutes can seem like an eternity. Because truly imagine, if you really truly think you are dying, that is a horrifying feeling and horrifying situation. So even I think 1 minute in that realm in your head can be difficult, and in a way that's a traumatic experience in itself, because the brain is really thinking, oh my god, I'm actually going to die here. So of course a panic attack, the hallmark of a panic attack is that it's typically not linked to any physical exertion. So it's not like you've been out for a run, or you've been at the gym, or you've had to run to catch the bus or the train. The point is you're kind of otherwise kind of relaxed and pretty calm, and suddenly your body's gone into this mode like it's under intense physical exertion. The attacks are recurrent over time, so they will keep happening. And during an attack, the person who's having it will experience a very strong urge to seek safety. So that's like, get me the hell out of here. That can happen if you've ever had claustrophobia and a panic attack because you've been confined in a space. I had this experience probably 3 years ago now, when I was on a beautiful holiday in Vietnam, and we were about to go. I was on this tour with my son. God, it was really embarrassing, and took me by surprise. And we were on this tour, and we went to see the Cu Chi tunnels, which were very important, played an important role in the Vietnam War. And so there are these little tunnels built underground. It's fascinating. It's absolutely incredible what the Vietnamese people did, to defend themselves. And they had whole systems and structures down there, and whole rooms, and entire families would kind of live down there, and armies would be down there to surprise the enemy, really. So there's still these Cu Chi tunnels, and you can go have a look at them. The thing is, they're really low, so you can't actually fully stand, and they're obviously really confined, and you can't, there's no fresh air, there's no light. They do have lights in them, kind of thing, but I remember we were starting to go in, we went down the stairs to go in there, and a couple of people just started walking out. I remember thinking, what are they doing? Can't be that bad. And I kid you not, I took a few steps in there, and I just had this whoosh feeling of absolute panic and fear. And I knew what was happening. I'm a psychologist, so I was like, oh shit, I think I'm potentially having a panic attack. And I'd never had one before. Fortunately, it wasn't a full-on panic attack. But what I couldn't do in that moment was override it, even though rationally I knew what was happening, and I knew that I had nothing to be afraid of. Probably. You don't actually know. Something could have happened down there. But that's what my mind was telling me. And I couldn't control it, and I had to sort of back out and excuse myself and get out. And so I can't go back down there. And it was awful, it was, and I didn't have a full-on panic attack, but I could feel it coming on, and I couldn't do anything to stop it, no matter how much I talked to myself and tried to calm myself. And I wanted to sort of go through there with my son and be this great role model. But instead I had to confess that I was human, and I was not able to cope with that situation there and then, So I guess I tried to use it as a teaching moment that, yes, I'm human and I struggle with anxiety sometimes, and that for whatever reason just really freaked me out. And I kind of should have known, because in the past I have found some other situations that are very confined, a bit difficult to manage, but many, many years ago. So my point is, I have not a full on, but I have some understanding of what it's like to be caught completely unaware that you're going to be overwhelmed by a panic attack, and how incredibly difficult it is to control that in the situation. Once the system gets activated, you're on a wave, really. You're on this wave of internal activation that is very hard for your mind to talk you out of or talk you through. So, that the whole thing of me telling you that story was related to that. During a panic attack, a person has a strong urge to seek safety, to get the hell out of the situation, and that's exactly what I did at that time. Not fun. As I've mentioned, yes, panic attacks can happen in your sleep. And that can be really, really frightening and alarming because there's no apparent trigger. It's just suddenly happening. And I think that would be really difficult too, because you feel like there's no escape from it. Even when I sleep, I can go into a panic kind of state. Panic attacks in themselves aren't a psychiatric condition. However, they can be part of a panic disorder. And you would need to get an assessment really by a psychiatrist or a GP who's trained in mental health issues to get a diagnosis of a panic disorder. Remembering, and I have mentioned this before, that unfortunately psychologists, counsellors, anyone who's not a doctor cannot formally diagnose anyone with anything. We can suggest that. We can say, based on the evidence or based on what this person has been talking about, it looks like they have a panic disorder, or it looks like they have social anxiety, or whatever that is. Because they've described these symptoms, but we can't formally diagnose that. So if you wanted an official diagnosis, and some people find that really handy because it helps them make sense of what's been happening for them. Other people are so not, there's a piece of fluff, other people are so not into being diagnosed and having a label and kind of worry what that means for them. Totally cool, totally get that as well. It's very much up to the individual. Panic disorder and agoraphobia. So let's talk a bit about this. So someone with a panic disorder who has a persistent fear of having another attack, that's really common, or worries about the consequences of having an attack, that would be one of the symptoms of a panic disorder. And many people change their behaviour to try to prevent attacks. This is what I was talking about before, when people start avoiding places, situations, events, all this kinds of stuff. And really what's happening is your world is getting narrower because you're trying to avoid these horrible feelings and the potential to have a panic attack. So you start to sort of restrict yourself and your life, so much so that sometimes people stop going out and they become agoraphobic. They are afraid to leave their house. They're afraid of kind of open spaces. So with that's kind of a quite severe avoidance. And panic disorder is more common than you might think. A recent study, when was that? 2006, nearly 15 years ago, reported that nearly 23% of people reported experiencing a panic attack in their lifetime. Nearly 4% have a diagnosable panic disorder, and about 1% experience panic disorder with agoraphobia. Worldwide, internationally, that would equate to potentially millions of people. So you're not alone. Really, I think it's really, really important to remember that, because when we're struggling in general, let alone with a mental health issue, it's very, very easy to think I'm the only person. It feels like I'm the only person in the world who's going through this right now. And I guarantee you that you're not. There would be someone else probably actually in the world right now who's feeling what you're feeling, as well, even though everyone's situation is unique and their circumstances are different. We're human at the end of the day, and we're made up of the same building blocks. And unfortunately, we all struggle, And I guess that's the beauty of, the internet, that we can get online and find other people who are struggling like us. We can go into forums or chat rooms or whatever that looks like, and get support that way. And I think that's a really important and really powerful thing. If you've ever done any group work, any group therapy or group programs, many, many, many times people find the most rewarding and important aspect of a group program is seeing and talking to other people who are struggling with exactly the same issue as you. Sure, you want to be learning some new stuff, kind of thing, but mostly the beauty of being in a group is that you're like, oh my God, when I hear their story, that reminds me of me. I'm not the only one. We can understand and relate to each other. It's just fantastic. And I see that over and over and over again in every group that I run. And I run a whole variety of groups, parenting groups, as well as sort of anxiety groups, self-compassion groups, and the whole kind of gamut I've run over the years. So the trick is, though, with panic and anxiety, getting to a group is really difficult. It's so ironic, We have had that issue in the past when we've run anxiety groups here. They're very popular. We get quite a bit of interest in running an anxiety group, but for people with full-on anxiety, actually showing up to a group can be intensely anxiety provoking. So if you can find online groups, that is great. Actually, the anxiety group that we run here is now fully recorded and as an online course that you can do in your own time. So we're releasing that on our new membership website. We have our launch party for that in a couple of days on the 26th of November here in Perth, Western Australia. And on that site you can access many of our courses and also little short talks, short ebooks, stuff like that. But one of those courses, like I said, is it's called Shifting Your Perspective on Anxiety. And you can just do that in the comfort of your own home. Take as long as you like doing it, do what you like, leave the rest, It's really, really cool, really flexible. So think about that as well. How did I get onto that subject? I was talking about groups and stuff like that. Anyway, let's get back to panic. I wanted to talk, before I talked about that, there's a cycle of panic, but I did also, let me go through, I want to talk about safety behaviours. Okay, so what the hell are safety behaviours? When I talked before about how one of the responses somebody can have when having a panic attack is that really, really strong urge to seek safety, like I did, literally backing out of a tunnel with 10 people behind me. I kid you not, that's what I did. It was really embarrassing, I have to admit. But the fear of the panic, the fear of something happening was worse than my embarrassment. So that's how strong that urge is when you're in the middle of that. So that was the safety behaviour that I engaged in. I had the urge to run, and believe me, I got the hell out of there, and then I was like, I'm never doing that again, which I kind of wish that I had or tried again, but I didn't, and I need to be kind to myself about that. So what are safety behaviours though? So safety behaviours are used in an attempt to prevent fears from coming true and to feel more comfortable in the situations we're anxious about, right? So that makes sense. We just want to feel safe. That's an incredibly ancient mechanism inside of us. We need to feel safe where we are and who we're with. So if your brain is telling you that situation is not going to go well, that there's something scary here, I don't know what, but I'm feeling something and I don't like it, we are likely to feel anxious and to have the urge to avoid the situation. Of course, many people are very anxious about, say, public speaking or what else do people worry? There's so many different things, but I'm just going to use public speaking as an example. So they're so worried about it, they will avoid it. People sort of say, I'd rather jumping out of an aeroplane, or I'd rather die than get up in front and speak to people. That's major. That's a major kind of fear. So they'll do anything they can to avoid public speaking, for example. And if we can't avoid the situation altogether, we might use subtle forms of avoidance or precautions to try to prevent our fears from coming true. So we would call them safety behaviours. Safety behaviours may be very different for different people. Of course, that makes sense. It's not what you do, but why you're doing it that determines whether something is considered a safety behaviour. So let's look at some examples. So a behaviour, a safety behaviour example is staying quiet in social situations. What's the fear that the behaviour is intended to prevent, the staying quiet? What is it about? The thought might be, if I talk, I might say something stupid and I would feel humiliated. So a way to manage that fear of looking like an idiot or being humiliated or blushing, if you're a bit of a blusher, is to just be quiet and not say anything if they really want to. It's so frustrating to be in that situation. Another behaviour example might be not touching things in public. So what is the thought process behind that behaviour? The safety behaviour to not touch anything. The thought might be, if I touch something, I'm going to catch something, I'm going to get sick and I might die. Or I'm going to pass it on to my child, my family member, and they're going to die. So really catastrophic thoughts, we would say. And I know if anyone actually watched me last week, I did say this week I'm going to talk about unhelpful thinking styles. and catastrophic thinking is one of those styles. And I'm not talking about that today because this one was already kind of scheduled. So I thought, oh, okay, I'll talk about panic. Next week, definitely going to be talking about unhelpful thinking styles because I still think that's really, really helpful. So what's another example? Bringing my water bottle everywhere. You know, why? There's nothing wrong with that, surely. But what might be going on with that, particularly if someone is prone to anxiety and prone to panic? Their thoughts might be, if I get anxious, I will get a dry mouth and choke. So I need to have my water with me. I need to be drinking all the time. And you can see, even as I'm articulating that thought, if a person is really anxious and using that water bottle, you know, as a way to manage that, there's this kind of franticness underneath those thought processes. I'm gonna choke, I'm gonna get a dry mouth, I'm not gonna cope. So if I have my water bottle with me all the time and I can drink it all the time, I'm gonna be okay. You know, it's a strategy, and it's a strategy that might be working, or it might have worked in the past. But again, in the long term, we need to think about, well, is that really workable over the long term to have any of these strategies? Another behaviour. Tell me what you think about this. Wearing headphones on public transport. Well, I say that a lot. But what that may be about for some people is they might be having thoughts that if someone tries to speak to me, I wouldn't know what to say and they would think I'm an idiot. So I'll just kind of put my earphones in and just kind of blot out the world, whether you're actually listening to something or not. You know, and I'm not saying that everyone who's wearing earphones out in the world, out in the public, is worried and panicky kind of thing. Sometimes we just don't want to talk to people, or we just want to listen to our music or a podcast or whatever the hell you want to do kind of thing. But the point is that it could be used as a strategy, a safety behavior to engage in, to avoid feeling certain feelings. Okay, that's the point. So what are we saying here? What's my hair doing? If you are uncertain whether something is a safety behavior or not, ask yourself, how anxious would I feel if I could not do this? If you would feel anxious without that behavior, it's probably a safety behavior that you're engaging in. Hope that makes sense. That's a really good question to ask yourself. How anxious would I feel if I could not do this? So if you can't bring your water bottle everywhere, if you can't not touch things in public, would that make you really anxious? If the answer is yes, it's possibly a safety behavior that you're engaging in. There would be many more examples which I don't have in front of me, but you might already know some off the top of your head, or you can always go and do some more research about that as well. So why are safety behaviors a problem? Like, what? They seem kind of helpful. What's the big deal? They're making me feel better, at least in the short term. I'm not so anxious. Woo. But unfortunately, they keep anxiety going in the longer term. And, you know, we've got anxiety and then we've got panic, you know, kind of thing. So we're not really helping things. Safety behaviors stop us from directly testing our fears. Okay, so if you're not touching things in public because you're worried you're going to get germs, casting aside the fact that we are in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, I mean, how freaky is that? And honestly, I felt terrible for people who are already struggling with fears around germs, who have really bad OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, or really bad health anxiety. You know, anyone like that typically is very germ phobic. Or any kind of postnatal anxiety, postnatal OCD that can really show up as well. I don't want my baby to be held, or I don't want my baby touching anything in the public, out in the world, there kind of thing. And here we are with COVID-19, you know, kind of thing, which would be just a disaster for anyone who genuinely really struggles with fears around their health and germs and stuff like that. So I just want to kind of bracket that and say I'm not talking about, this is like pre-pandemic, and just assuming that that's not around, you know, just kind of cast your mind back to that. So in that example of either not wanting to go out in public, or when you're in public not wanting to touch anything, or having to sort of wipe everything down, you know, or engage in any kind of safety behaviours there. If you keep doing that, you don't actually get to test whether that fear is real and true. So what that might mean, a test around that, would be to go out into public, touch some things, you know, go to the supermarket, use a trolley or use a basket without wiping it down or putting disinfectant on your hands or anything like that, going shopping, putting things in your basket, going through the checkout and having to touch the EFTPOS machine, all these kinds of things, and seeing if you do actually get sick. Okay? That's a way to test whether that fear is real or not. We're actually doing some detective work on ourselves and our thoughts, really, to see is this real or is it not? Heaven forbid if you do actually get sick. I think that would be really bad luck. But we would assume that you probably wouldn't, but it's those underlying fears there that are driving you. So what's another reason why safety behaviour might be a problem? Safety behaviours can become self-fulfilling prophecies. Worst thing ever. Safety behaviours can actually cause the outcomes that we're trying to prevent by using them. For instance, imagine if I stay quiet at work meetings because I'm worried about saying something wrong or irritating someone. But then what might happen is, say your bosses notice this, they might actually get more frustrated with you because you don't contribute in meetings than if you did contribute from time to time. And so you're actually starting to create this problem that you're wanting to prevent. So if you're worried, I'm going to look like an idiot, or I'm going to say something stupid, so I'm just going to say nothing, or I'm going to wait until people leave the room, or I'm going to wait until it's a one-on-one situation, other people around you might actually start thinking, well, they're not really good, they're not contributing, they seem like a bit of a slacker or something like that. Terrible. Hopefully people don't think that, but we never kind of know. So you're accidentally creating the very thing you're afraid of. You're afraid that people are going to think badly of you, so you engage in these safety behaviours to stop that, but actually, possibly, people might start still thinking badly of you. And as I'm talking about that, I'm like, ooh, that might actually increase someone's anxiety. Definitely come in and see someone for counselling if that is happening to you. That is not a fun situation. But the point, I think it's actually quite a good example of how we want to avoid things, but actually that could create more problems. Another example of safety behaviours being a problem. If our fears don't come true, we mistakenly thank the safety behaviour. Okay, so what's that about? So if we use our safety behaviours and our fears don't come true, we might believe that the safety behaviours prevented our fears. I mean, really, that's kind of logical. That kind of makes sense. But as a result, we become very dependent on our safety behaviours and start to feel even more anxious when they can't be used. So you can see the problem that's creating more problems. And like what I was kind of saying a few minutes ago, often it's not the problem that is the problem. So what I mean by that, often it's not the anxiety that's the problem, or even the depression or the panic. It's what we're doing about those feelings, okay? We're struggling to tolerate really uncomfortable feelings, so we engage in these behaviours to try to get out of feeling that way, or avoid them, or deny them, or change them, many different things. The human mind is very clever that way. But those behaviours become a bigger problem than the original issue, the original uncomfortable feeling. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. The truth might be that our fears might not have come true even without the safety behaviour, but we never discover this as long as we continue relying on our safety behaviours. Another reason why safety behaviours are problematic, they can increase self-focused attention. So safety behaviours can often take our focus off the task at hand, and instead our awareness becomes overly focused on ourselves. For example, our thoughts, how we're feeling, what's happening right now, which can lead to further anxiety. Gosh, that's so true. So again, if we're using the example like that I was talking about before of, say, being in a meeting at work and you're just staying quiet because you're worried you're going to make an idiot of yourself or stumble over your words, say something stupid, start blushing, start sweating, all these kinds of things. What you actually finally end up doing is sitting there obsessing about what people are thinking potentially about you, and we would call that mind reading. That's another unhelpful thinking strategy, hence I do want to talk about them next week. So instead of being present in that staff meeting and listening to what's happening and listening to people and, wondering about the content and, problem solving, whatever issues going on at your work kind of thing, you become more and more inwardly focused on what's happening for you right now. And that is, I'm terrified, I'm freaking out, I don't want to say anything, so I'm not going to say anything, but what are people going to think of me then? Someone's looking at me, blah, 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 and you're actually not really present at all kind of thing. And as I've talked about before in probably another couple of live streams, the trouble with a lot of mental health issues, I mean, there's a lot of troubles, there's also a lot of gifts, but what can be quite problematic is that with any of these difficulties, with any kind of lack of willingness to sit with uncomfortable feelings, is they pull us from the present moment. They pull us from ourselves in a healthy way, so instead of just kind of being there and, like they say, being able to focus on the task at hand, you're worrying endlessly about what if. What if I say something and it's the wrong thing? What if I make a fool of myself in front of people? So we're putting ourselves in the future, imagining all these worries, all these things. That's right, I did talk about this when I talked about worry. So I'm kind of doing this whole thing I'm talking about anxiety, worry, panic. It's all kind of sits on the same umbrella there. Fears. Typically with something like depression, that is pulling us back to the past. So we're often ruminating and remembering and obsessing about things that happened in the past, or a loss or something that hasn't happened, or something we're missing out on. Many examples. The point is, often when we're stuck in struggling with not being willing to feel some uncomfortable feelings, our mind is putting us in the future or putting us in the past, and we're really missing out on our lives here and now. We're spending so much time in service to our head, really, and trying to stop feeling certain things and trying to manage this kind of what feels like crazy thoughts, that we're not actually living our lives. We might not be really present at work, or we might not be present with our children or our partner. We might just hide away from the world and miss out on all these great things that we want to be doing. And hence it's really, really important to get some help. And there absolutely is help out there for anyone really in the world. No matter, your any kind of financial limitations or physical limitations, as an example, our service is why we kind of changed to doing a lot of stuff online. Certainly our national government here in Australia changed some of the Medicare rebates to allow therapy with a psychologist to happen online, via phone or Zoom or something like that, via telehealth, to allow rebates to for that, so that people could still access services without physically having to go somewhere. So there's many ways to get help, and I truly understand how difficult it can be to come and get help when you're really, really anxious. It's very, very, just getting out the door sometimes can be hard, let alone telling someone, hey, I'm really struggling and I'm freaking out and I don't know what to do. Your GP might be a good first point of call there to chat, have a chat, if you know them and if you trust them and if you think they get you. But sometimes that can be really difficult, and it does take such courage to come and get some counselling or start talking to someone about your problems, especially if you're coming to see a stranger essentially and sit in a room with them and kind of feel all this kind of stuff. It's really, really hard. So it does take a lot of guts to come and get some help, and if that means at first, I'm just going to go online and do some kind of online stuff, you do that first. But my point is, there's absolutely no need to keep suffering. This is your life at the end of the day. It's worth facing some of your demons with help. Do that slowly and gently so that you can live the best life that you can live. There's absolutely no need to be living with this much fear and anxiety when it's totally treatable. All this stuff is absolutely treatable. So that is safety behaviours, what they're about and why they are a problem. So there's just a last little point here I wanted to read. If anxiety stays high after repeatedly confronting a situation, you are likely using safety behaviours that are preventing you from testing your fears. It's important to recognise safety behaviours so you can plan to stop using them in anxiety-provoking situations. So what they're kind of talking about there is if, say, you are in some sort of treatment and what you're doing is testing out your anxieties and your fears by what we would call exposure therapy, and you're still finding that anxiety or the panic is still there, you're probably still using some of your safety behaviours to keep you safe, you know. And I think it's really important to honour and acknowledge and thank that part of our mind that is just trying to keep us safe, that just wants us to feel good, to feel okay, you know. We don't want to beat ourselves up for engaging in any of these kind of behaviours, because it's just a way that we're using a strategy to cope, you know. And often we do that. Often as adults, actually, what can sometimes happen is we've developed some strategies in childhood or adolescence that helped us at the time deal with maybe some difficult family situations or a difficult life situation, and it kind of worked back then. But then when we kind of continue those strategies into adulthood, we find that they don't work in the outside world, they don't work outside the family unit kind of thing, and that can get us into difficulty because we're kind of banging up against people and places and situations, and we're like, why are things so difficult? Why am I in conflict all the time with people? And sometimes that can be a reason why. I want to talk a little bit before I finish up about the vicious cycle of anxiety, because absolutely it is a cycle. The same with panic, you know, panic being an extension of anxiety, particularly with a panic attack when there's all this stuff that's going on with your breathing. Actually, maybe I'll start with that. The importance of breathing and breath when you're having, when you've got anxiety, and particularly when you're having a panic attack. So breathing is a powerful determinant of physical state. You know, when we exert ourselves, our breathing increases, and a whole range of changes in the body start to occur. Perhaps you've noticed this when you've had little frights, you know, and you've been scared. You're like, you know, you kind of take this quick breath in because you're like, whoa. You might feel a little breathless or a little lightheaded if you've had kind of a shock. Believe it or not, the way we breathe is a major factor in producing these and other sensations that are noticeable when we're anxious. So anxious breathing, let's get into that. That's really helpful. You probably already know that we breathe in to obtain oxygen and we breathe out to expel carbon dioxide, okay? Basic science. The body naturally maintains these optimal levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide. And this balance is in part maintained by how fast and how deeply we breathe. When we exercise, for example, we breathe faster and more deeply to replace the oxygen being used and expel the excess CO2, excess carbon dioxide, which is being produced through metabolic changes from exercise. Anxiety, however, causes an increase in our breathing rate as part of the physical fight or flight response that I talked about at the beginning, to a perceived threat. So really remember that. This is what's kind of happening in the brain. There's not actually a real threat there. The brain is interpreting it as a threat, whatever that situation is. However, when our breathing rate increases without physical exertion, we breathe in too much carbon dioxide. If the body cannot quickly return carbon dioxide levels to normal range, we experience further symptoms such as dizziness, lightheadedness, headache, weakness and tingling in the extremities and muscle stiffness. The normal rate of breathing is 10 to 14 breaths a minute. What's your breathing rate? So you could just do a little experiment on yourself at some point. Just be sitting somewhere kind of where you're kind of calm, you're still, you're not worried about much, and have your watch or a phone in front of you and just count how many breaths a minute you're taking. So when you're really anxious, you definitely, you probably would have noticed this, or if you haven't, I really encourage you to notice it now when you're feeling anxious, how, like they were saying, your breath starts to get shallow. So instead of deep belly breathing, not chest breathing, chest breathing is all about kind of anxiety and stress, really. When we're stressed and when we're really anxious, let alone when we're having a panic attack, we kind of take short breaths, short, sharp breaths, and we take more of them. And remembering when we take more of them, we're altering that natural balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide in our body, and we're building up the carbon dioxide, so the body's frantically trying to get rid of it. So we're trying to breathe out more of it, and then we can start to panic, start to hyperventilate, and boom, we've actually kicked off this completely innate physiological response in our system that is actually going to exacerbate panic and anxiety. So we need to kind of retrain the body and the mind in how to breathe properly. So while temporary overbreathing and hyperventilating are not dangerous in itself, okay, you're not going to die from that. Continued overbreathing can leave you feeling pretty crap, pretty tired, pretty on edge, because you're constantly like, just this kind of short, shallow breathing, which just, even as I do that, makes me feel slightly anxious. And you're kind of then always on edge. You're kind of already primed for panic and anxiety, okay? So gaining control over your breathing involves slowing your breathing rate, and changing your breathing style as well. So I'm just going to read through some of their little steps here they have for doing that. So firstly, ensure that you're sitting comfortable, sitting on a chair, lying down, whatever works for you. Take a breath in for 4 seconds through the nose if possible. Hold for 2 seconds and breathe out for 6 seconds. So that would be a lot slower breath, kind of more controlled breath. I'm kind of doing this because that's how I kind of visualize it. If I'm doing that kind of slower out breathing than in breathing, pause slightly before breathing in, and away you go. If 4 seconds is too long, start with 2 seconds. Breathe in for 2 seconds, have a little pause, and breathe out for just a little bit longer than you breathe in. That is quite powerful for affecting the vagus nerve, I think. I was reading about this recently. I'm not going to talk about that at all because I don't know enough about it, but it's quite interesting. So this is really, I know it can seem really trivial and silly. You just want me to sit around and practice breathing, or practice meditation or some mindfulness activities, anything that's helping you slow down and slow your breathing and start to actually do belly breathing, the deep breathing that is much more healthy and helpful for the body. But it's very powerful. You'll be surprised at how powerful it can be to learn how to breathe properly. There's extensive research on breathing and the importance of breathing, obviously we need to breathe, but in anxiety and panic and stress and many other conditions in the body. So here's some tips, breathing tips. When you first begin changing your breath, it might be really difficult to slow your breath down. So like I said, just instead of doing 4 seconds, maybe aim for 2 seconds, breathe in for 2, hold for 1, breathe out for 3, something like that, until you can kind of build up. And you might even find that you can extend an in-breath to 4 counts within a few minutes of just sitting still, kind of thing, as you start to kind of sink into that kind of relaxation. When you're doing your breathing exercises, make sure that you're using stomach breathing, as I've said, rather than chest. So it can be really helpful if you're practicing this or doing any kind of meditation or breathing focus, to have one hand on your chest and one hand on your tummy, whether you're sitting up or you're lying down, and so that you can feel, where am I breathing? Okay, so I'm breathing in my tummy, but I'm trying to make a conscious choice to do that, because you'll feel that. You might even see that at the corner of your eye. I'm not sure how big your boobs or your tummy are, kind of thing, but you'll be able to feel which one is moving most. Is it the hand on my chest or is it the hand on my tummy? And we really want the hand on your tummy to be breathing more, to be pushing kind of more, engaging the diaphragm at the bottom of the lungs, rather than all these chest muscles, which is keeping you really tight and tense and anxious kind of thing. What else are they saying here? Try to practice this as much as you can, once or twice a day. That can seem like a lot. If that's going to be too much, try every second day, every third day, kind of build up. We want you to start to get used to breathing more calmly, breathing more deeply, remembering to breathe. The more you do this and it becomes more automatic, the more you'll be able to think about, what is my breathing doing when I'm starting to feel really anxious and panicky, okay? Remembering that a few of those symptoms of panic is the alterations in breath, the short, sharp kind of breathing, the upper kind of breathing, the tension in the chest and stuff like that starts to, sorry I'm opening up, but really when you're very panicked and anxious, you're kind of closing in on yourself almost. So we're wanting to learn to kind of expand our chest and our tummies kind of thing, so that our brain can start to think, hey Mel, you're starting to panic here, I want you to breathe. So it's kind of like we're teaching ourselves to do that, as if there was this kind supportive parent or person with you, being able to hold your hand and go, hey, you're starting to panic, remember what we taught you, remember what we were practicing, let's take a deep breath in, kind of thing. Maybe doing some grounding exercises as well can be really helpful if you start to really panic or dissociate. Grounding exercises are literally like connecting yourself back to the earth. What am I feeling as I'm sitting on the chair? Can I feel my legs sitting on the chair? Can I feel my feet on the ground? Where are my hands? What can I see around me? What can I hear around me? What can I smell around me? Ground you back into the present moment. Ground you back into your breath and your body. Really, really important, particularly when you're feeling very anxious, very stressed and very panicky. I'm just noting that I'm nearly at the end of this live stream. I do tend to talk for a whole hour. Somehow I managed to rabbit on for a whole hour on Tuesdays. So I won't continue on, but I do encourage you to have a look at that content that is on the CCI website, the Centre for Clinical Interventions. Have some really good stuff, like I've mentioned. We'll be back to live stream the later half of this week on Friday. I'm not sure what the topic will be then. If you have any ideas for topics that you'd like us to live stream on related to mental or physical health or wellness, any of that kind of stuff, we're really happy to hear any ideas you might have. Maybe it's something related to Christmas that's coming up, or the pandemic, or anything, parenting, or whatever kind of thing. We will do our best to do some research around that and to do a live stream on that topic. So, send us a message via Facebook or our website, which is www.whws.org.au. You can call us, you can email us, all this information is on our website.